Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
With a lifetime of passion for public television, we are pleased to help underwrite Informed Sources.
Please join us in supporting WYES TV.
Hello, I'm Robbie Chavez, a correspondent for the PBS NewsHour. Marcia Kavanaugh is off tonight. She will be back next week. Well, crime is hardly a novel topic, but it got new attention this week as a citywide coalition announced its formation to provide advice and funding. All this happened in the same week that the governor signed a bill to prevent accidental early releases from prison, and when a former state senator was charged with a felony for using political party funds to support a gambling addiction. We'll be discussing these stories tonight, plus looking at old buildings drastically needing a new life. And just for kicks, as well as the economic development, the city will be getting a professional level soccer team. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources, ERROL LABORDE, Informed Sources producer, David Hammer, investigative reporter, WWL-TV, Channel 4, Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter, and Tony McCulley, staff writer with the Times-Picayune and New Orleans Advocate. And Tony, let's start with you. The city got a new coalition today, this week, announcing what all of us have been hoping for, some solutions to the growing crime problem. Tell us a little bit about who this group is, where they came from, and what are they bringing to the table?
Yeah, well, it's a group. The core group is about 75 broad-based civic groups, neighborhood associations, some business interests, economic development interests, and also crime prevention advocates. And there's another group then of 100 businesses, which is it's been growing this week. It's went from about 150, the total amount from 150 to about 180. So they seem to have got a lot of consensus around the issues that the city is facing on crime, and what they've done. The approach that they've taken is a two-pronged approach, and the objective is to try to get around some of the political chatter that's really seemed to have a lot of people talking past each other, and a lot of debate about what to do on the crime crisis rather than apparently action. And that's been manifested, if people have been following it, by, for example, earlier this year, the chief of police, Sean Ferguson, calling out the district attorney's office for a revolving door policy, with some of the alleged criminals. And then the city council just last week, two members, Helena Moreno and J.P. Morrell, calling out the mayor about not enough action on crime. So the objective of the coalition overtly is to say, look, there's the crime survey, the annual crime survey has shown that more than 80% of the population in the city agree that crime is out of control, and they also agree around certain things that should be done to try to tackle it. And that's two things, both the stronger police action and different policies at the DA's office and in the criminal justice system generally, as well as more investment in the community at the grassroots level to try to deal with some of the issues in underprivileged neighborhoods that leave youth with lack of educational opportunities, job opportunities, and so on. So on the latter is, you could say, is the relatively easy part. Almost everybody agrees that in the primarily black communities, there's been underinvestment for historically for decades or longer. So they've initially pledged $15 million over 3 years, $5 million each year, to a whole range of programs. Which the first one they got underway was $500,000 that's going to fund 37 summer programs like Crawdads in City Park and a bunch of programs like that. So, you know, Son of a Saint, all those kinds of organizations will be getting more funding under this. But the stronger policing was something they want equal emphasis on, stronger policing and criminal justice response to the crime crisis. So they laid out a bunch of things that they think should be done, and first and foremost was getting more money to the NOPD to fill the 20% vacancy rate that they have currently. They've got almost 400 vacancies out of the 1,500, more than 1,500 budgeted. So they've specifically identified a bunch of funds that the city could have access to. Which includes $155 million of the rescue plan, the federal rescue plan monies that was allocated to the city that is yet not accounted for.
Yeah, it's certainly good to hear some of these solutions coming forward and to kind of stop the political noise, if you will. Talk a little bit about where is the mayor and the city on this? Pretty quiet during this announcement. You would have expected some counter programming for the mayor to kind of say what the city is doing right. Talk a little bit about what that says in terms of the confidence that these leaders have in the city's ability to tackle this problem.
Yeah, the main message of this, I think they didn't overtly say this when they were announcing this coalition, but they mean to say it. They behind the scenes, and actually some of the individual coalition members have said it, is that there's just been in their view a really inadequate response. So the mayor didn't actually respond to our request for a comment directly about the coalition, but after the two council members criticized her, she mentioned a bunch of programs that the city had been funding, similar to the nonprofit ones that the coalition is funding, as well as efforts to try to beef up the police and so on. She pointed to that, but in politics, it's a lot about the optics, as they say, if you pardon the use of that word. And the optics, after the council members and after the coalition, the mayor did a flurry of sort of town hall meetings and public safety photo ops and so on.
We did see that.
I think that suggests that she's noticed,
Right.
But then on the other hand, her critics will obviously latch on to the fact that she is today in Antibes in France and she was off in Switzerland. Those kinds of things. The mayor and her backers have said that's just her opponents.
Okay, we're gonna have to
playing politics, but it's an easy shot to make at her,
Great, thank you. We'll leave it right there. Let's move on to David rather. David, talk to us about this new law geared to stop early releases or late releases that the governor signed this week. First, tell us a little bit about what this law does and how does it change things.
Yeah, Robbie, the new law actually requires the Department of Corrections to notify victims of violent crimes or sexual crimes 60 days in advance whenever a inmate is being released early for good time or for parole. And the reason this all came about is kind of extraordinary, the way that it came about. Chad Becknow from Norco reached out to me in February and said, this guy Brian Mathern, who was a coach and teacher in my grammar school, has been let out after serving only 22 years in prison, and provided documents that showed that he had been sentenced to 29 years, 11 months, and 29 days in prison, specifically so that he would not be eligible for any good time or early release. And those documents were very clear from the sentencing hearing back in the year 2000. So I went to the Department of Corrections and I said, in February, why is this guy out earlier this month after, with 7 years still left to go in his clearly marked sentence? And they said, we need to look into it. And several days went by and we didn't hear anything. And I went up to Tangipahoa Parish, where he was living and a registered sex offender, to try to talk to him. And actually, my cameraman and I were attacked by his brother-in-law when we tried to go to the property to try to talk to him. But the the upshot of this is that he had been put back in prison at midnight several hours before we arrived to try to talk to him. And the Department of Corrections at the time was not admitting any clear fault. Well, just this past week, the governor admitted that there was a mistake made by the Department of Corrections.
And he apologized, right?
He apologized directly to Chad Becknow, who was one of 17 confirmed victims that this person, Brian Mathern, was put in prison for sexually abusing. There were as many as 90 victims that came forward when he was charged back in the 90s. So the point here is that people who were put in prison for violent or sexual offenses, it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that they're let out of prison early, and that the hope is that by notifying victims earlier, that if there are any mistakes that look like they're going to be made, that they can do something about it before the person is let out of prison. Because what we've heard actually in testimony back in 2017 from the Secretary of Corrections, Jimmy LeBlanc, is that they actually make more than 100 mistakes every year, releasing people either too early or too late. And the governor acknowledges that that's a problem, but that it should never have happened in this case, and that this was a very upsetting situation. And so very quickly, Greg Miller, who's the state representative from Norco, brought forward a bill, and it passed. And the governor was happy to sign it and to apologize to the Becknow family.
Well, and talk about where do we go from here? We have a new law. How do we make sure that these things don't continue to happen? The law says there'll be more computers involved, more eyes on this, but ultimately there was no discipline to anyone who let this child molester out 7 years earlier. That's
right. The Department of Corrections says they're not going to discipline anybody. Basically, they've got 3 people on a staff who are responsible for doing this by hand, manually. That is conducive to more of these problems happening. And so clearly, that's going to be where the proof is in the pudding of this new law. Will they actually put into place some automated systems to make sure these kinds of problems don't continue to happen? And I'm going to plan to keep an eye on that to make sure that you know, the law does what it's intending.
And just great reporting all around, David, that led to this law. And there's another reason why we need good local reporting like you. Let's switch gears now and go over to ERROL. ERROL, we saw a big shift this week. Karen Carter Peterson was in court. She was charged with a felony, a big fall from political grace, if you will. Tell us a little bit about what we learned from these charges and where does the party go from here?
Well, if you recall last April when the fall began, it came quickly. The legislature had just started a new session, and suddenly she announced she was resigning. Not resigning the following week or the following month or at the end of her term, but that day. And so she quickly got out of there, and she said that she was having a lot of emotional problems and personal problems that she had to deal with. We have known from past incidents that she had a gambling addiction. She's admitted to that. And so it was assumed that was part of it too. Since then, we've learned, and actually what the plea was yesterday, was that she took money. She's also chairman of the State Democratic Committee. She took money from the State Democratic Committee as well as her own campaign fund and diverted it to her own use. And so that's what the charge is. It's one charge based on that. How much money it was from the Democratic Party, we don't know. We do know that she made restitution of $53,000, and the Democratic Party said we're whole on that. So maybe that's what it was. So August 1st, she's going before a judge to make an official plea.
And Errol, talk a little bit about, she may not be the only one charged in this case. It looks like there may be others, and she may have to testify.
Yeah. There are several people looking like 5 or 6 different names that had to do something with it because in some case the money seems like was withdrawn, it was diverted to some other company, and then that company gave the money back to her. So there was a lot of that sort of thing going on. And so, yes, there's another possibility that's going to be happening, too.
And, Errol, let me just point out that it was the reporting by my colleague at WWL, Katie Moore, that exposed that there was this gambling addiction issue when Karen Carter Peterson was actually issued a summons for appearing when she wasn't supposed to be at a casino. And it raises these questions of whether if that had been not been pointed out by Katie in her reporting at the time, would any of this have come forward? Would we have discovered that this money that from the Democratic Party was being funneled partially to her gambling addiction?
Certainly all of this unfolded very quickly. We'll leave a little bit of a political void. We'll see how this gets repaired with her missing. Let's move on now to Dawn, who's been keeping her eye on Canal Street. Now that the Hard Rock has been cleared away, we're all looking to see what's going to happen down there and whether or not a new development will start up again.
Well, there are several areas on Canal Street that are certainly ripe for development. Canal Street has started to turn over as they expected it would with the biomedical district. There is a lot of demand there. Just recently this summer, the apartment complex at 1535 Canal Street sold to California investors for a price tag of $120 million. It's apartments, 1 and 2 bedrooms. They saw in there an opportunity where they will have no problem raising rents and keeping people in. It's been very effective. So there's opportunity on Canal Street. There are investors from New York, Texas, and local who are currently looking at the former Governor House Hotel on Canal Street. That right now has a sign on it that says Canal Street Hotel. It has not been open since Katrina. It's been remediated, it's been fixed up a little bit, but it is 220-ish rooms, a pool, a rooftop area, ripe for development for somebody. I have to confess, my brother-in-law actually is handling the listing on that building, so I have some insider information, hopefully all that I can report. It's on the market for $15.9 million. There are 3 different offers on the table for it right now with a variety of uses. Some that would just be hotel, some that would be flexible, mixed use, kind of rent it out part-time, rent it out just for the night, so kind of hotel/apartment uses, and entertainment. Both of those that area is ripe for also historic tax credits, both at the state and federal level. Rehabbing that blighted building on Canal Street, as we were talking before the show, really changes over one whole corner. It's the corner of Canal and Claiborne that hasn't really been touched since the biomedical district came in. If you drive Canal Street through that area, you've got big, new, beautiful buildings. You've got landscaping. You've got some nice new stores and restaurants. I'm told that the fact that we now have, we have the Ritz, we have the Four Seasons, we have a Virgin Hotel that opened. New Orleans in that section of town is certainly attractive to local and out-of-town investors. So will we ever see a full renaissance of Canal Street like it once was? We'll see. As for the Hard Rock Hotel, can you believe it's almost 3 years since that happened? It'll be 3 years in October. The site is clear. As for redevelopment there, it is so tied up in litigation, it could be quite some time before anybody can come in and change out. The owners can't sell it. Nothing new will happen there. The other really big structure on Canal Street that we wanted to talk about today is the State Palace Theater that had been the Lowe's. It opened in 1926. It had a kind of storied history through the 90s and into early 2000 here in New Orleans, when it started hosting rave parties and then was under federal investigation for whether or not drug dealing was going on in there. It was closed in 2005 after Katrina flooded the basement, reopened briefly. The owners who in 2014, it was sold to Gregor Fox, who learned that the renovation was going to be too expensive for him. Then it was sold to business partners in the LC Hospitality Group in 2015. They were rejected twice in 2018 for proposals that would put a hotel there. They were rejected by the Historic Landmarks Commission. It is on the market again, and now for $7.2 million. So hopefully someone will come along who can come up with a plan that A, is approved, and B, is affordable to the owners. Yeah, let's hope that very soon we can see Canal Street imagined as the grand thoroughfare, as you mentioned, that we all hope for. Let's turn to the Bywater, another area that needs some help because of the Old Navy base there. The city went in this week, Errol, and cleared it out and closed it down. But what next?
Speaking of blighted buildings, this may be the most blighted building. It's on Pullen Avenue, And a lot of people can live their whole life in New Orleans and not go down Pullen Avenue, but it's a major structure in that area. It was built in 1919. It was used as a Navy facility. It did a lot of that type of work as a military facility. During World War II, it was a port of embarkation, and a lot of soldiers left for Europe out of there, and a lot of boats left for Europe out of there. And so it had a busy early period. Over the years since then, it's been looking for a lot of different uses. At times, it's been run by the Navy, by the Army, most recently by the Marines. It was obviously too big for what the needs are now. I do remember one time working on Canal Street for a while. It was a common sight to see Marines out running from the port of embarkation to Canal Street and back. I always thought I think every neighborhood should have Marines running down their street. I think it's a good thing to happen. But anyway, the city got possession of it a couple of years ago, and they're closing it down, and they're looking for something. There's a developer, Joe Yeager, who has professed some interest in it, but he had a meeting during the week with some of the neighborhood people, and if you read the press accounts, he kind of said, I don't know if this is going to happen. He says, I got to get financing. I need a lot of money, and it just doesn't seem to be coming together. And so there's not too much encouraging. What they're talking about, and this is always the idea when you have an empty big building, is some sort of combination, multi-purpose thing with condos and retail. Whether or not that's good for that neighborhood, you can understand condos working like in the warehouse district, because there's a lot of business around there, and you're close to Canal Street. Pullen Avenue is a little bit far from most things, and so it could be kind of a hard sell. But
you have to keep in mind that Joe Yeager didn't just profess interest in it. He's had the lease now for years. The city had this property handed over for free from the Navy and provided the lease to Yeager. So they've not been able to secure it for years and years now. So a lot of that rests on his shoulders.
There have been some issues with various properties that were his that have taken longer than hoped for. So that's an issue. And there was nothing that he said that make people think that's going to happen any quicker.
Yeah, he seemed to be pointing fingers at the federal government, and so we're going to think that it gets stuck in a bureaucracy before anything moves forward. Let's hope that neighborhood gets some help. Let's move on back to Tony, if you would. Let's pass the ball, if you would. Tony, you did some great reporting about a professional soccer team that might be coming to the city. Tell us a little bit about how we got here and where will they play?
Yeah, well, where will they play is a question that they've asked us to answer for them. It's kind of, this week was a promotional week for them. They wanted to let the city know that they are coming, that there's a franchise that's been awarded here. This is the United Soccer League, by the way. It's the tier down from Major League Soccer. And to give you some idea of where it sits, the Major League Soccer attendances are average around 20,000, with the top attendances. Atlanta's the top attendance of like 48,000. The top attendance for the USL Championship top league games are around 10,000, and the average is around 5,000. So it's that kind of level. What they've asked us. Citizens of the city to weigh in on what colors they want the team to be, and social media and the sports talk radio has been Mardi Gras colors, obviously, some format of that kind, and the names have been all over the place. One that came out yesterday that sounded pretty interesting was the New Orleans Horns, playing off the jazz kind of image of the city. But the real question anyway is about where they're going to play, because with all of these big sports franchises, it's a real estate play first and foremost. And what it really looks like now is it's going to boil down between as a fight between the Shrine on Airline to try and get them out there, and they've invested. They approved investment of $15 million last year specifically to attract a professional soccer team. However, the folks behind this have said very clearly that, while they're neutral on the face of it, what they favor very much is an urban core site, and they want people to be able to walk from the stadium to other amenities. I mean, they've clearly painted the picture of having a stadium, new-built stadium, down at the River District, which is what they're calling that new neighborhood that's going up on the barren acreage adjacent to the convention center downtown. It's a huge development of housing, and they previously called it the entertainment district because there's going to be a civil rights museum put in there and various kinds of entertainment facilities, as well as housing, retail, and offices and so on. So that's going to be a fight because Jefferson Parish and the folks that and the LSED, the Superdome Commission, they really want that shrine to get something to fill the void left by the baby cakes when they left. Right. A couple of years back, and NOLA Gold Rugby's been playing out there, but they need something else there. And soccer is big in the parish, by the way.
Yeah, and talk a little bit about the fan base, if you would. Can the city support another team, and who are the fans?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question because. I mean, this is most of the USL championship cities are smaller cities that don't have Major League Sports like New Orleans does, but Atlanta, of course, is an exception. And you got places like Sacramento. The one that has the highest attendance is Albuquerque, which was a 2019 expansion for the USL championship. The swell of support. By the way, I should mention it's a men's team and a women's team at the top level. They want to start here.
When is their season?
It runs April to October, so it's pretty much like the baseball season. Okay. And it runs into, obviously, the Saints season, so that's one of those question marks. But the fan base, by the way, for soccer in this country in general has been largely Hispanic, or not largely Hispanic, but helped certainly by the Spanish-speaking population in the country. And that sort of favors Jefferson Parish to a certain extent. But the people themselves, I'll finish on this if you want to move on. They've said what they're really going for is they want millennials and Gen Y folks, and like I mentioned about what they want people to be able to walk from the stadium. And it's notable that the people that they want to, the local backers that they're targeting, have focused on some of those recently rich tech folks here who sold their companies last year.
Thank you. We'll leave it right there, if you will. Thank you. Let's go around the table now and see what other stories are you watching, Errol?
Okay, we talked about Karen Carter-Peterson resigning her Senate seat. The election to fill that seat is coming up. The qualifying will be next week, July 20th through 22nd, and the actual election date for the primary, at least, will be November 8th. Okay,
David, what are you watching?
Well, next week is a historic week in the city of New Orleans. The sitting district attorney, Jason Williams, goes on trial, federal trial, for federal tax fraud charges. And I'll be there Monday. It'll be jury selection, and it'll be very heavily watched, I'm sure.
Big story indeed. Tony, what about you?
Well, I just mentioned the River District. That's been, a decade in the works, and in about a week or so, they're actually going to sign the deal that's going to, lay out the specifics and give a timeline about when they're going to break ground on that thing. So we'll be watching that pretty closely. Big project.
Don, we'll round out the show with you.
All right, actually watching Where the Crawdads Sing. It's the movie based on the bestseller that was shot in New Orleans, Madisonville, and Houma. Expected to be a big opening weekend this weekend, and see what they're doing film-wise locally.
We are looking forward to seeing that. Well, that is our show. Marcia will be back next week. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.
Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
With a lifetime of passion for public television, we are pleased to help underwrite Informed Sources.
Please join us in supporting WYES TV.